Well, good afternoon. My name is Ethan Collier, and I'll be chairing today's meeting of the Chattanooga-Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission. A couple things I want to go over before we get started. There have been some slides playing overhead for the last few minutes that walk you through how our meeting runs today. We have an agenda which hopefully you have a copy of. I don't plan to make any changes to it. At times we'll move quickly through the agenda, so make sure you follow along as we move through the cases. The Planning Commission members received this packet in the mail a few weeks ago and have had the opportunity to review it prior to today's meeting. And so in some cases, if there's no opposition present and we have a staff recommendation to approve, then we will approve the case without hearing the entire case from staff. In each case, I will ask if there's any opposition present. Sometimes people don't think that they're necessarily here in opposition. They just have some questions or they have some concerns. But please do raise your hand if I ask if there's any opposition present in regards to that case, because that's my only way of knowing that you're here and that you would like to speak to the commission in regards to that case. In each case, we'll hear from staff first. Then we'll hear from the applicant. The applicant will have 7 minutes. Then when the applicant's finished, there might be some back and forth between the Planning Commission members and the applicant, some questions. The applicant will sit down and we'll hear from opposition. We have a total of 9 minutes for opposition. It's not uncommon to have more people here than 9. In some cases, we have even a greater number than 9 that want to speak. And we do stick very closely to that 9 minutes of total time for opposition. So I will ask that if you're here and you're in opposition and you want to speak, that when I ask for opposition to come forward, that all of you that want to speak would come over to my left, your right, and line up behind the podium over here on the right side of the room so that I can see how many people want to speak and I can make sure that as many of you are heard from as possible. I'll also say that as you're standing there in line, make sure to pay attention to what's being said by the people in front of you, because if a point has already been made, you may not want to use up your time saying the same thing that has already been told to the Planning Commission members. After that 9 minutes is up, the applicant will have 2 minutes to respond to any questions or concerns that have been brought forth by opposition or the Planning Commission. After we hear the case, the cases will be moving forward to the City Council and the County Zoning Committee meeting, and those dates are March 10th for the City Council and the County Zoning meeting on March 11th. So make sure to follow along for the dates on when these cases will be heard, both at the city and the county. One more thing, after we hear the case, we want to move on to the next one. Other people are waiting patiently for their cases to be heard. So I would ask that all the opposition and the applicant make their way out of the room as quickly as possible and make sure that the doors in the back are closed so that our meeting can continue.
Mr. Chairman, staff has 2 comments. One, if you're speaking today at the podium, there's a sign-in sheet. So if you can, please sign in with your name and address and what case you're here speaking about. And number 2, we are live streaming the meeting today and being recorded and will be posted on our website. It's something new. Something new we're starting today.
Okay. Thank you. All right. I think that covers all of my opening comments. With that, we'll move into the first case under subdivision plats and variances. This case is SD 2020-0016. This is a variance request for 7 lots, minimum suburban infill lots, and it has a staff recommendation to deny. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? We'll hear from staff first.
Yes, this is for a variance for a suburban infill lot frontage variance. It's section 7. It's only 2 lots, so it's not 7 lots. It's at 8435 Igo Gap Road in District 4 in the city. We have since corrected the agenda. Here's a view of where that property is located at. Igo Gap is in the front, and here is the proposed property. It's existing flag lot that has one lot that's 15 foot wide at IGO gap. The request is to divide this lot into two lots with existing lot frontage of 15 foot. The second lot would be in the rear with no frontage available or no frontage along existing road except by a private easement. Section 3844-7 of the Chattanooga zoning code requires minimum lot frontage of new infill lot frontage shall be not less than the smallest lot frontage on the same and opposing block face within 300 feet of the property to be subdivided. The arrow right here is the property being subdivided. Almost right across the street is the smallest lot within 300 feet, and that lot frontage is 61 foot. Therefore, both these lots have to have 61 feet of lot frontage. He doesn't have that. So the variance request would be 46 foot and 61 foot. There's also a section in the Chattanooga zoning code regulations that says 38-25. Every residential building to be constructed, remodeled, or structurally altered shall be located on a lot fronting a public street. Proposed lot 2 would not front a public street and would be in violation of this section of zoning regulations. So again, he's asking for a lot frontage variance to have a lot that does not have any road frontage. For the second lot, both lots would not comply with the minimum lot frontage of 61 foot. Proposed lot 2 would not front a public street, which is not in compliance with 3825 of the zoning regulations. This would permit a lot that does not have adequate road frontage and would be accessible only by private road. And this would set the precedent for future requests along IGO Gap Road. Therefore, staff recommends to deny the request.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Before we hear from the applicant, are there any questions for staff? Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brian, let me ask you this question. Can you run the calculations for me if that entire property was zoned RTZ? You can guess.
Well, you still have to have road frontage. He would not be able to meet that.
If the whole property was RTZ like it is next door?
Correct. He doesn't own this one to the right. He has a little 15-foot flag strip. Therefore, he could not get.
I understand. I'm looking at this from a much bigger picture.
Okay, let's see.
That whole lot, if it were to be developed as used as RTZ.
Around 7, because it's outside the urban overlay. The max is 8. He's about 1.5 acres in size. That includes the flag strips. I'm guessing 6.
6
Potentially. That's gross. That doesn't mean that's what he could probably get.
6 or 7 units?
Potentially. That's strictly based on his 1.5 acres.
Oh, I'm going with the whole property. You're not. Let's look at, take that whole strip right there. If that were to be rezoned RTZ.
I don't know how big that property is.
Adjacent.
Since that's not part of this request,
Okay.
That's not something this applicant owns.
That's fine. I'm going to count them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it looks probably about 10 to 12 maybe could fit on there if that was rezoned. Okay, that was my question. If the way the property is, if it were the entire property to be rezoned RTZ, how much density could be packed in there? So that's the only question I have for now. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions? We'll hear from the applicant.
Yes, sir. My name is Live at 8435 IGO Gap Road, Lot 3C. I'm going to try to take you back 22 years in 7 minutes. And I thank you for the opportunity to be here to hear this variance request today. First, I have not created hardship on myself by going out and buying a piece of property that does not conform to current zone regulations, and then coming in here and asking for a variance. I have not done that. I'm now retirement age, and like a lot of seniors, I'm looking to cut cost and bring my expenses more in line with my current income. I live in a 2,700 square foot house, and by building another structure, the cost of maintenance, upkeep, property taxes, insurance would substantially be cut by about 2/3. The house that I propose to build on the current lot that I'm asking for a variance would be about 1,000 square foot. It would be a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house. The zoning regulation that the commission is referring to was put in effect in 2009. But I go back to 1997 under a different zoning regulations when the purchase of the property was made. In 1991, as noted in your handout that I put in front of you, a new zoning was put in effect for the Joe Morris Estate. It was considered to be 8455 Igo Gap Road, and it was divided into 3 lots, being A, B, and C. In 1997, as shown in the handout I gave you, the properties came up for sale. I went to the city and I inquired as to the regulations that were in effect at that time. I told them my intentions to develop the property. It was not for a lot of homes. It was not going to be a subdivision. And they assured me that there was no issue. So I purchased the property. In 2003, on Lot 3B, we cleared we put in a driveway, we cleared the property, we brought all utilities up to 3B for the use of a home on Lot 3B. And that was done in 2003 under the current zoning regulations, which the house was built by oversight of the city by the building permit code. Then in 2007, we extended the driveway back to Lot 3C. There again, the utilities were extended back to that properties to allow for another home. So in 2007, by the oversight of the city building permit, another house was placed on that properties. In 2009, I did not realize that the zoning had changed for the property that I bought in 97. If I had known or had been notified in 2007 or 2008, I could have surveyed this parcel off that I'm asking for a variance on today and made it an additional building lot. But I wasn't aware of that fact, neither was I notified. If you'll note in your handout the picture of the house that I live in today, and as of the wooded section that I left, which was a half acre, I left it in its natural state, knowing that I would come in future years to build an additional structure on that property. Also in your handout today, what I'm asking for is 90 feet to the north end of the property by the existing width of 165.79 feet, which has been the size of the property all along. I've looked at several house plans, and this is the one I keep coming back to, is noted in your file. It's approximately 1,000 square foot, 2-bedroom, 2-bath house, and I like the looks of this house. So what I'm asking for is for your consideration to give me this variance so that I can complete the process that I started 22 years ago. The game got changed in the middle, 12 years after the fact from when I bought the property. I've always adhered to all city, county regulations as to the properties. The driveway was 30 feet, and that is a utility easement all the way to the end of the property. So utilities are not an issue. There's a main trunk sewer line that runs from the end of my property all the way down to Igo Gap Road, which I've already tied into twice on the 2 existing homes that have been put in on the property. So I think I should be, and I respectfully request that you allow me this variance so I can put the last house on the property. The property initially was 4 acres, which I bought. Life changes over a period of time. Went through a divorce. We divided the properties up, 2 acres each. She wanted Lot 3B, had no problem with that. I took Lot 3C. So I'll take any questions that you may have at this time.
Thank you. Any questions for our applicant? Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I see your GIS? So, Mr. Elgin, I'm looking at GIS right now, and I'm just out
I'm
of
sorry,
curiosity.
Derek, could you speak up? I raced cars for 20-some years. My hearing's not what it used to be.
Sure, I'm looking at GIS right now, and I'm trying to look at the end of the, is there already a house? There's already a house on that lot?
On 3C, yeah, the
On
current house I
3C?
live in.
Okay, and so it's the wooded area
To the north,
to
yes,
the
sir.
north that you're asking for?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then my next question would be, Brian, for staff, and that would be, Brian, I'm sensing a trip to Boza on this. If it were to pass here, can you advise me on that if I'm correct?
Yes, they would have to go to, this variance is for the lot frontage. Then there's also section 38-25 of the Chattanooga regulations that will require him to go in front of BOZA, because that creates a lot that does not front a public road. So you'll have 2 variances, this one today, which is for lot frontage, and then to section 38-25, which is in front of BOZA.
Okay.
So there's 2 variances, but one is for today.
I want to make sure the applicant Mr. Elgin, you understand that if this were passed today, that you still have another trip to go in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals, and that that a hardship would be a pretty substantial item to prove that this is not just a one-step process here today?
Yes, sir, I'm aware of what the process is.
Okay.
And on that point, let me say that this is only going to put 3 houses on a original 4-acre tract. So density is not an issue. There is a town hall subdivision next to me, which we have a side skirting fence between us. I've left portions of the property to the east of me still somewhat wooded, which gives a buffer between me and the houses to the east of me. And I'm prepared to go forth to meet any requirements. I still come back to the intent that I was under the regulations that were in effect in 1997, and in which I went to the city and went to the county,
Sir.
and I met all regulations at that time.
Sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to make sure that we have the opportunity to answer any other questions. Are there any? I asked earlier and I didn't see any hands go up. Is there any opposition present? All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any questions for staff?
Go ahead, Mr. Matthews.
Mr. Matthews?
Brian, what's the footage on the 3C on his road frontage there on the flag? Is that 15, did you say?
It is 15.
15. Was there any thought of trying to just split that and giving him the 7.5 or anything like that for a flag?
Well, you cannot do flag lots in the city anymore. That's what he's referencing.
Right.
That went away in 2009
Right.
because of situations like this. The city council directed staff to create this suburban infill lot frontage option, and that's what he's asking for today. The whole intent was to create lots that are compatible with adjoining properties, and that's why you look at the map. Let me get back to it. The smallest lot, all these are really large lots, except for this one here right across the street, 60 foot. So that's a big variance the planning commission will be asking for or approving.
Councilman Ledford?
Thank you, Chair. Brian, you probably don't know this, but I'm going to ask anyways. Do you know what kind of notification process was done in 2009? You probably weren't here.
I was here.
You were here?
I was
Okay.
here, fortunately. We did not.
You're way too young to have been here, but that was a compliment.
Thank you. No, we did notifications not to adjoining property owners because this is not a rezoning case. This is a typical zoning case amendment, so our PC was advertised and city council meeting was advertised.
Okay, but the property owners were not.
They were not because they did not rezone property. This is a zoning text amendment.
Okay. I always try to go back and look and see notification process based on cases we've heard at city council where notification was an entire foundation
Right.
upon which zoning case was based on. So I think that's a pretty important item for me. Mr. Chairman, I know it's a little unorthodox and it is a big ask, and knowing that BOZA is another step, but given that I don't think maybe that notification and the intent was properly relayed to the property owner at the time, and knowing there's a next step, I'm going to step out on a limb a little bit and give this gentleman a chance, and I move to approve.
We do have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Just one question for you. So I don't know how many cases we see that are variances like this, but in what cases is RPA notifying property owners?
On a variance request like this, we were required to notify property owners within 300 foot of this property.
No. I guess my question is when zoning text amendments
Oh.
happen, or when because that wasn't just a zoning text amendment, that actually,
Yes,
you're also referencing a city code.
yeah, that's
So
section
there was also, city council did something.
38. Let me back up real quick here. The variance request is for this suburban infill. We did notify for that. Now, when the zoning text was amended in 2009 to create the suburban infill, we did not notify all the property owners. That would have affected everybody in the city of Chattanooga. So it's like any zoning text amendment that we or Planning Commission adopts. We advertise in the paper, and City Council advertises that City Council meeting through the Times Free Press. Same thing as Section 3825. Has been in the zoning code as long as I know.
Okay, so you never send out notification?
We do not. Now, zoning cases where there's zoning property, yes, but this is a zoning text amendment, so we would not send out letters to adjoining property owners.
Or to the property owners
to the
themselves
property
that would be affected?
Correct.
Okay.
That's my content there, Mr. Chairman. If I had known, I could have surveyed the property out and we wouldn't be here today.
Thank you. Any discussion? We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Next case on the agenda is SD 2020-0011. It's located at 8610 Prophet Lane. And this is a preliminary plat, and it has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, we did receive 2 letters of opposition. You should have those in front of you as well.
Okay. And is the applicant present? Did I? Okay. Mr. Schultz.
Yeah, I'll try to go through this. This is, this is a subdivision plat and not a rezoning. This is off Snow Hill Road. I know this map's a little hard to see, but this is the particular property highlighted in the orange. This is Snow Hill, I-75. Here's the property. Go back a little bit of history on this property. The R1 portion you see on the top screen, that was rezoned in 2001 from A1 to R1. That property has conditions on it. There's 4 conditions on that property. No trees to be removed in 20 feet of the northern property line. 15 acres to be set aside for community and or natural areas. The subdivision limited to 275 single-family homes and only 1 ingress-egress from Snow Hill Road. Those conditions only apply to the R1 portion that you see on the screen. The part to the south, which is the green color, is where you're seeing the plat today. This is a request in 2019 to rezone this A1 portion from A1 to RTZ. RPA staff recommended to deny that rezoning request. Planning Commission recommended to approve with 2 conditions. Limit to 2.7 dwelling units per acre, entrance onto Snow Hill Road, and secondary entrance onto Mountain View Road. Hamilton County Commission denied the zoning case. That was dealing with the zoning. The developer still has the right to come in and do a subdivision plat based on current zoning, which is A1. On the screen is the subdivision plat highlighted in orange. This is phase 1, which is actually everything to the left. You see the stream in the middle of this property or plat. Everything to the left is phase 1. So phase one has 137 lots. The total acres in the A1 zone is 101.11 acres. Therefore, it's a density of 1.35 dwelling units per acre. Has one entrance on Snow Hill Road. I'm assuming it'll be phase two, which is the part to the right across the stream. They're proposing 62 acres. That brings the total density or total number of units for this phase, which is in the A1 zone, to 199 dwelling units, an overall density of 1.97 dwelling units per acre. The subdivision plat was reviewed by the Subdivision Review Committee. It meets all the requirements of the A1 zone and the subregs. So staff recommended to approve with 3 conditions. Submittal of required information for review and approval of sewer use by Hamilton County WWTA, that is standard. Submittal and approval of all required hydrology pipe calculations and reports required to the county engineering office within 30 days. I believe those have been submitted, giving county engineering staff more time to review, and also correct the title block to reference preliminary plat only. So staff recommends to approve the preliminary plat for phase 1, which is lots 1 through 137.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff?
Yes.
Commissioner Bankston?
Yeah, I would like to know, I know how this density works, but the area that is taken out of this, is that not going to be used anymore? Is that designating that not for use anymore in order to get that kind of a density?
Again, we based on gross. It's the overall gross density, so they're proposing to use that 101 acres, is my understanding. All they're asking for today is phase 1.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, if you come back to that other part of A1, are they not, just in order to get that density, they're saying that they won't use that part?
No, they're not saying that. I'll let them speak for
But I thought
themselves.
that was the only way you could do that.
No, we use gross density, which is the overall, they're not doing anything to the north. I'll let the applicant speak on the plat. But again, we look at gross density, which is the 101 acres.
Any other questions for staff? Okay. Mr. Farmer?
Just to follow up with Commissioner Bankston's question, so you look at, we're approving the preliminary plat for phase 1,
Correct.
but the entire site is how you figured the acreage, not just on phase 1, on the density.
Correct, it's gross.
Just
It's gross and not net.
But I want to clarify, I have a question. I think that when you figured the gross, you counted the units that they had planned for in the future phase.
Yes, if you look down the very bottom, if what we calculated is shown the plat is 62 additional units, the overall number of units in, if you want to call it phase 1, phase 2, whatever that phase is, everything highlighted in the orange, that's a total of 199 dwelling units with a density of 1.97, still 2 units below 2 units per acre.
so, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So, to some extent, you're limiting the amount of lots that can happen in future phases.
Right, they're limited in A1 to 2 units per acre. That's per the zoning code.
Right. So, within that, they've got ability to overload their zoning in phase 1, if that's, or overload their absorption in phase 1, and have less lots in phase 2.
And the second phase could be 10 homes. However that number works out, it's still gross on the overall A1, not specific phases. It's total.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner? Councilman, sorry.
That's okay. Thank you, Chairman. So, Brian, let me back up and just ask this simple. They're within the density calculations for A1.
Yes.
Thank you.
Do you want any more questions?
Sure, bring them on.
We'll hear from the applicant. Come on up.
I'm Charlie Sherrill with North Point Surveying. We're the surveyors of record for this project. We're from 2719 Hickory Valley Road. And I don't have anything to add right now, as long as density is cleared up. But the density, as Brian said, would be a total density of 1.97 when the whole A1 is developed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? All right. I did see some hands come up in opposition, is that right? If you'd like to speak, come on up to the podium.
Well, my name is Josh Kane. I live on the south end of this property, of the shaded area. The addresses are 6408, 6402, 6407, and 6403 Snow Hill Road. I've owned this for approximately 6 years. I know the actual development very well. And have expressed a lot of concern with it. With this piece here with the actual phase 1, I know we're getting the densities is getting all correct and things, but I would like to point out the fact that I know RPA had actually made a recommendation of doing hydrology study. I think that's very, very important. What you see here, out of the 100 acres proposed plan, there's about 50 or 60 acres in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, whatever it is, in that area of the whole entire property that's actually in the floodplain. So it's not buildable whatsoever, unless you somehow want to float a boat over there. But in any case, I think they've made a recommendation of a, completed hydrology study. I think that's very, very important for this area because obviously I live there and I've seen this water get out. And if you throw in 127 homes or 147 homes in this one phase, you're going to speed up some water drastically. Obviously, this used to be a horse farm, all pasture. Putting in roads and houses is going to drastically speed up the amount of water flow in this area. I don't think it's necessarily, it's a concern to me because I live next door, but I think it's going to be a concern way down. There's actually 2 creeks on this property, and pretty serious creeks when it gets to be flooding. The other thing that I'd like to point out real quick is there's major accidents on this road all the time. I witnessed a kid get killed right in my front yard. This is on the south end tip here, approximately about 100 yards from the entrance that they're going to put in here. We were told from the get-go that they were actually going to put in a turning lane, and we don't see any turn lanes whatsoever. This is a blind spot. Yesterday there was a young lady and her baby had a major accident there. They were actually lucky they walked away, and it was directly across from the entrance of where this is going. I just think there just needs to be a little bit more attention to the well-being of the people around there, and the amount of accidents and problems that occur up and down that street. I just think it's a really hazard spot. My wife and I, on a wedding venue on this property, which we bought in 2015, we come before you guys and received a special events permit. We do have weddings there. We abide by all the rules that was set forth by you guys. I'd like to go on record saying that we have never, ever had one single complaint. And we continue to operate a business there, give back to your community, support our community, and still have a actually working farm. So, thank you.
Is there anybody else that wishes to speak in opposition? All right, Mr. Lehman. All right.
Yes, sir. My name is Wayne Walker. I bought a house up there on Bell Mill Road, which is at the turn at the top of the hill. Bought up there in '79 when there wasn't many houses up there. And I go back and forth up Snow Hill Road. I'm here to say you cannot get in and out of Bell Mill Road half the time. There has been so many wrecks. There was 2 this past weekend. Then up at the top of the hill on the other end, where the helicopter lands up there at that house, there was four vehicles run off in the side of the road up there. But I have sit out there and counted many times because I'm a retired firefighter, but I work a part-time job up at Bear Trace, and I travel the road in the mornings from 7 o'clock to 7:30, I pass about 40 cars within a mile and a half. At 7:30 to 8:30, there's 92 cars to 100. And when you go down and you try to go past the school, you can't get past the school in the mornings, and you cannot get turned on to Mountain View there. You cannot get over. You have to go all the way down, and they've got a turnaround there at the gas stations, or you have to go over to Crystal and make a U-turn to get out. You cannot get in and out of Snow Hill Road right now. But the wrecks they had, like I said, they had 2 just yesterday. And if they're going to do something like this, they've got to widen the roads. They cannot keep it like it is, because you cannot it'll shut the school completely down from when they start putting that in if they don't do something. So, but I appreciate you listening, but I've been there for quite a few years, and it's changed tremendously.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak in opposition? There's 2.5 minutes remaining.
I'm Christine Clay, and I live on Snow Hill Road at Bell Mill. As far as the turn lanes, we were under the understanding that they would be already implemented as part of his plan. As they were saying, it's not in the plans that we see. So we want to know, if they have to be put in place by 2025, I know that. But it looks like he's already developed all the way up to the road. That's not allowing for easement on his side. So it looks like it's going to be on the county to do it later on, which is going to cut into the property on the other side of the road. So, again, he was supposed to be required to put the turn lanes in himself, but it looks like it's going to be on the county and on other people across the street's property and not his, because it's not in that plan. So, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Mr. Lehman.
Sure. I was even going to respond without some of the comments, but I will. Since Hamilton County Engineering does look at these requirements as part of a preliminary plat, I do want to mention a few things, and there's a little difference in preliminary plats relative to rezonings. Rezonings have a lot of conditions associated with it. Plats have regulations that must be followed, and so let me mention a few things about Snow Hill Road. I do work for the county, for everybody that doesn't know. So there has been increase in the volume of traffic on Snow Hill Road. It's about at 77,800 is the average annual daily traffic taken by TDOT, so it is getting quite a bit. There have been some accidents. I will tell you that there were 2 fatalities in 2018. Prior to that, there was one in 2011 and 2010. So as part of that, TDOT on a lot of occasions will do safety audits, so we are currently underway with a safety audit on Snow Hill Road. Related to that, I don't know about the accident that just happened because it takes a little while to get into the system, but those are the fatalities they pulled, and they are currently going through accident reports as part of that safety audit. You don't see turn lanes on here because it's a requirement through permitting, through the engineering process, and you don't see engineered plans. But I will tell you there is a right turn decel lane and a left turn lane as part of the permit process for this connection on Snow Hill Road. And again, to I guess comment on some of the statements is that we are continuing to look at Snow Hill Road relative to safety, just like we do with all other roads. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lehman. Any other comments? Okay, we'll hear from the applicant. You've got 2 minutes to respond.
Hello, I'm Kelly Richardson with LDA Engineering, 735 Broad Street, Chattanooga. To the turn lanes, there is a two-way left turn lane per the recommendation of the traffic study that was completed. There's going to be one at each entrance on Snow Hill Road. The first phase does have that included with a right decel turn lane as well. Per Mike Hendricks in Hamilton County Engineering this morning, they have all the information they need on the plans for that, and he had no further comments at this time. So that is part of this plan. It's just not shown on the plat. And as far as the hydrology, we will work with engineering to make sure they have everything they need if they are lacking anything at this point. And as far as the floodplain, we're not filling in the floodplain. There will be one road crossing in the future from phase 1 to the back portion of A1. And there will be one from the back portion of A1 in the future to the R1 side. Other than that, there's no fill activity, and it's been set aside as green space.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? All right. Well, we've heard from staff, the opposition, and the applicant. What's the will of the commission? We have a motion to approve with conditions.
Second.
And it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is case SD 2020-0013. This is located at 4700 Cummings Highway, lots 701 through 732, and this has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is SD 2020-0014. This is Carrington Court subdivision. It's lots 32 through 36 of Notting Hill and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. First case we have here is under old business is case 2020-0013, and this is located at 5500 St. Elmo Avenue, and it does have a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Mr. Schultz, can you brief us on that?
Yes, this case was submitted last month. We did receive a letter in opposition last month, but nobody was actually present at the Planning Commission meeting last month. Staff originally recommended to deny the request to see UGC. Planning Commission directed staff to get with the applicant to see if there was some kind of conditions that could be worked out to address some of the nuisance issues. And so staff and applicant came up with 5 conditions. Those 5 conditions are on the screen. Approve UGC with the following conditions: auto-oriented uses, warehousing and wholesaling, adult-oriented establishments, miniature golf courses and similar outdoor amusement facilities, hospitals, self-storage facilities, open-air markets, animal hospitals, kennels, drive-thrus, and hotels and motels shall be prohibited. Business hours restricted to between 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. on weekdays and 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. on weekends. No outdoor amplification of sound. Dumpster service provided between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. and building height limited to a maximum of 2 stories. One of staff's concerns last month was the close proximity of the home to the south of this property, plus the plan. The plan does support UGC or C2 commercial uses on St. Elmo Avenue and our corner locations, but staff's primary concern last month was the precedent we said of having UGC in the close proximity to the home that's just south of this property. But again, staff did meet with the applicant and came up with these 5 conditions to help address some of those nuisance type issues.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. And just to clarify, on the dumpster service, it's prohibited between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m.
Correct.
Was there any opposition? Okay. We'll hear from the applicant first, then we'll hear from opposition.
Hey there, I'm Emerson Birch. So this, the property at 5500 St. Elmo Avenue has been a rehearsal space and a space for musicians and stuff for about 5 years now. One of the intents of moving forward was to allow alcohol sales, so C2 or UGC would be a more appropriate zone for that. And as we've kind of been looking at what is the future of this, et cetera, we've had a lot of dialogue with the RPA, trying to find something that, I mean, I'm under no assumption that a UGC on St. Elmo Avenue is not like a big deal. I think it's actually kind of a big deal from the St. Elmo community, and that's one of the reasons why I was really happy to discuss conditions. I like the idea of requiring a 10 p.m. shutdown and 11 on the weekends. I like actually that if this property, say I sell this and this property is to be redeveloped, the building would actually have to move further away from the home that's adjacent due to the 10-foot boundary to the next adjacent residential lot line. And yeah, I'm obviously like wanting to be thoughtful with how this moves forward. I've had my tenants literally do walk-arounds and talk to different residents, and we've pretty much only gotten positive consensus moving forward, obviously keeping in mind that engagement continues ongoing. The landlord's part of that activity, and yeah, trying to be good neighbors and thoughtful neighbors. So I won't go back through all the numbers and stuff from the last meeting, but
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any questions for the applicant? All right, we'll hear from opposition.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name's Jenny Park. I own the property that you saw on the screen immediately south and adjacent to the property under question. I was unable to attend last month's meeting. I had a meeting with my board chair that I had to prioritize. However, I believe you received a letter from me last month, and I'm happy to be here in person to share my comments, and I thank you in advance for your consideration of them. My interpretation of this case, I did listen to the minutes when they were posted on Tuesday of last week, is that the primary impetus for this case is really to enable the current business owner, the tenant of Mr. Birch, to be able to sell alcohol. The rezoning would allow this use, and it will create a more viable business model for that business owner. So I'm not actually here in opposition to the idea of alcohol being sold at the property. I actually feel that the current business owner has done a good job with his business. My strong opposition is in using UGC zoning in order to address the question of how to sell and serve alcohol at the business. UGC would set a precedent in the St. Elmo neighborhood and potentially for other single-family detached home neighborhoods that are under your jurisdiction. I'm really unclear. I feel the initial staff recommendation of denial, only one of those items, there were 3 items that the staff gave as justification for the recommendation to denial. And only one of those was somewhat addressed, which is the nuisance issue. So just to go through those, the staff initially recommended denial in January for the following reasons. The proposal is not supported by the recommendations of the adopted land use plan, and that has not changed. It has the potential to introduce nuisances to adjacent residences. Some of those have been addressed. I have concerns about the extent to which the nuisance issue would be addressed with these conditions. And then the third reason for the staff's initial recommendation to deny was that it has the potential to set a precedent for future requests, and this also hasn't changed. This rezoning would enable a bar to be located directly next to my house. Whether that's the intention of the business owner doesn't matter because the rezoning would allow it in the future. And so that really truly is my primary concern. This is why I'm opposed to using zoning to solve this question. I understand that the tools that are currently available to the applicant's tenant are limited. And I think, as our city is becoming more urbanized, perhaps there will be a need to look again at the neighborhood commercial zone to see, are there other allowable uses that should be incorporated, or maybe there's a permitting process that may need to be looked at in the future. But I feel extremely strongly as a former planner, a longtime St. Elmo resident who now I live downtown, but I still personally maintain the house that I own in St. Elmo. I feel very strongly that this rezoning is not what's best for the neighborhood, and it certainly would have an impact on me. The business today is operating, I think, in a generally positive way. I have a couple of concerns, but I've never felt strongly enough for them to need to bring it forward with the property owner or the tenant. I feel that Daniel's done a really good job of the business in general. But the case really is hinging upon one person's desire to create a new revenue stream. And I've read this case several times, and that seems to be really the impetus of the application. And for that reason alone, I'll share that this will have a financial impact on me, and I'll share my story. I purchased my house in 2010, and at that point, I'd been saving for a down payment for 4 years. I struggled to get financing because I was a single woman looking to get a loan in 2010 while working 3 part-time jobs. It was very difficult. I finally found a realtor who was able to help me get financing, and purchasing my home was the most meaningful accomplishment of my life at that point. For the past 10 years, I've worked in local government and nonprofits. I now live on Main Street with my husband and family. 5502 St. Elmo Avenue is my only business investment. I do not own other properties, and as a nonprofit director, I don't have time to establish new revenue streams. I've spoken with realtors about potential impacts, their assessment, specifically ones that work deeply in the St. Elmo market, and they do have concerns about my ability to sell this. Many people who are coming to St. Elmo are wanting to purchase a home for a young family. If you had kids, would you want to live next to what could become a bar? There's no guarantee that this current business owner will stay there permanently, and then at that point, we would have no control over what actually goes in there. I would offer that the standalone building in a neighborhood context, the fact that 5 conditions are needed to simply make the proposed zone palatable to staff, that this is not the right zone. I believe deeply in the importance of planning processes and zoning decisions. The decisions of this body have long-standing impacts on our communities. I ask that your vote be based not on whether it is appropriate for this business owner to be able to serve alcohol, but on whether it's appropriate for a new development form to be endorsed in this location and whether the public benefit outweighs the likely cost. And I know that there was another person in opposition who was trying to make it here on time. I'm not sure if she has made it, but that's all that I have for you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you.
Ask a question of staff.
Yeah. Mr. Bailey.
Just a question of staff. There were references to 3 specific objections from last month from staff's review. I think the first one and the third one.
They're on the screen now. Should be in front of you. This is straight from staff recommendation from last month.
Well, let me ask the question more broadly. I think there was reference to 2 of these that the opponent felt like had not been addressed with the current change. Which ones were those, and what's the staff's?
Number 1 is not supported by the recommendation of the adopted land use plan. That's not going to change no matter how many conditions we add to it. That's always going to be the case because the plan recommends mixed use residential. This is commercial, but the plan also does say that commercial is appropriate on St. Elmo Avenue and at corner locations, which is where this is at. I think the St. Elmo plan was adopted in 2001, so that plan is fairly outdated, but it's still a valid recommendation. I believe the other one was number 2, introduce nuisance to adjacent residents. We've tried to attempt to address that through some conditions on hours of operation. Same thing with the dumpster, hours of operation on that. Number 3 is the other one the opposition said we didn't address. This will set the precedent for future requests in the area. So any zoning change that the Planning Commission or City Council acts on does set a precedent. And the existing C5 zone, which is condition number 4, it is limited use, the C5 is. So by keeping that C5 there, it does provide protection to the neighborhood. It limits the size and intensity of uses permitted at that location.
What zones allow alcohol and what zones don't allow alcohol?
C5 specifically prohibits alcohol. UGC does allow alcohol sales. C2 allows alcohol sales. But it's specifically in C5, it spells out that those uses are prohibited.
I'll yield.
Mr. Payne, and then Councilman Ledford.
Yeah, I'm just a little confused. You said that in that first part you said the proposal is not supported by the recommendations of the adopted land use plan. Then you said the adopted land use plan allows for this on a corner lot, which this is a corner lot and it's already commercial.
At this location, the plan, let me go back to the plan itself. It's hard to see in this map. It's just right down here. It recommends mixed-use residential. But then it also goes on to clarify that non-residential uses should front St. Elmo Avenue based on these following 3 conditions. Location on a corner, proximity to similar intensity uses, location on major streets such as St. Elmo, Alabama, or Tennessee Avenues. Well, the problem with this one is not close to any other intensity use zone. I think this is probably written closer down to the St. Elmo commercial core.
Right. But this has always been a commercial building, though.
No, it was rezoned in '92 from R2 to C5.
Okay.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Chairman. This has been an interesting banter back and forth, and what scares me a little bit is when UGC keeps coming under conditional applications. I think that it makes us wonder, and for those of you who don't know, the city is undergoing a complete zoning review very soon, and this is exactly why. I have to agree with Ms. Park that using zoning to solve little problems here and there is not the right answer. I had some reservations about this last month, mainly because I pointed out that in UGC you can build 4 stories. So I'm glad to see it went to 2. I would have liked to have seen it stayed at 1. The weaknesses in our current zoning are causing us some problems, as I stated a second ago. And as I see UGC coming along, and UGC is one of our newer zones. John, it was implemented in what, 05? Give me that date.
Early mid-2000s.
Okay, early to mid-2000s. And I'm watching it as it's being used along Broad Street. And we've had to make some additions. And now we're down into St. Elmo. And it's the list of conditions that are making it plug in is it's frightening me, because now we're at 5. And then it's going to be 10, and it's going to be 15, and then UGC is going to lose its complete intent. So I just wanted to point that out, because we are doing a lot of Band-Aid work in our zoning right now, and we need to be really careful. I know it's just the nature of where we're at in the city, and I look forward to it. So there's nothing, but I think C5 is the right call in this. I think protecting the neighborhood from the nuisance is the right call on this, but I just wanted to share those thoughts, because as I see this here on the Planning Commission, then I see it in City Council, the zoning and conditions are, have to say, are just getting longer and longer and longer, and I can't wait for the review and we start changing this.
Thank you. Mr. Birch, we'll hear from you.
First, I'd say I appreciate your perspective. Jenny's a friend of mine, and I'm in zero way in conflict with what she's saying. I really want to do the will of the people and in a manner that aligns with the zoning. I think that's why I tried to show at the last meeting that I've engaged with over 400 residents of St. Elmo. I made sure that my tenants walked to her tenant's house and talked to them face to face, and that there was a dialogue. I'm kind of in this position where I'm like, I don't feel like I want to make a strong argument against what she's saying. I'd agree with Councilman Ledford that we need better zoning tools. My decision to go with UGC was based on a discussion with the RPA. I thought maybe C2 would be another fit. The challenge was the positioning on the block, on the lot. So as a resident, I'm kind of caught in this awkward position of, how do I move forward as a property owner in a manner that is respectful. I don't want someone who owns this property to strong arm my friend and their any usage that they have. I think that's the only reason that I appreciated that the UGC would actually push the property back a bit if someone wanted to tear down and rebuild. So I'm trying to, weigh those different things, and until we get better zoning tools that allow for more of that kind of urban infill commercial stuff, I was like, well, I like this because it maintains some control over what's happening currently. I mean, they're even as a place for rehearsals or studio, they can operate till kind of as late as they want to. I think they've, by and large, been very well behaved in that respect. Yeah.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Chairman. So, Mr. Birch, I've always found you to be incredibly sensitive to what's going on in the neighborhoods, and I appreciate that about you very much. So I appreciate your words. My question to you is, are you in a hurry? I mean, is there?
So
is this
me personally?
time
I'm not in a
sensitive,
hurry.
or is there something?
Yeah. So candidly, I don't really care. I mean, the decision to rezone was based on a big neighborhood survey that had about 400 respondents, and then on a rezoning survey that had about 100.
Sure.
And so my tenants during that time said, hey, it would be great if we could sell alcohol instead of BYO or people coming and brown bagging or whatever. And so I was supportive of that. I'm supportive of commerce. I've run a business at this corner a lot. It's very difficult to make money with the current zoning. It's pretty challenging just because it's a pass-through space.
Sure. Have you had any nuisance calls with the BYOB
We've had no
process?
nuisance calls.
None at all?
Yeah.
Zero?
I called the police to ask and see if there was anything
Really?
as
Okay.
well. Well, because
That's good news.
Well, I think it's on my onus as an owner applying for a rezoning that I understand does set a type of precedent to take additional effort and to double check, because I think it's
important.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be a good neighbor, and I want my properties to facilitate things that are neighborly.
Very good. I believe that 100% from you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, I think if we wait on perfect zones, we're going to be here a while. I will say that. I mean, I agree with everything that's been said, but every month this planning commission meets and we work with imperfect zones. And I mean, not to say that, but even our form-based code, which is our newest code, is not perfect, which is evidenced by the fact that I think next month we've got some changes or some edits to make to it. So, you know, I think this idea that, you know, we have to have the perfect zone may not necessarily be the case. So that's just my 2 cents in regards to the fact that UGC isn't necessarily perfect in this location. Sometimes we might just work with the worst of the zones or the best of the zones we can find. I mean, I think our entire south side is zoned what? All the neighborhood is zoned C1?
I think so.
I mean, nothing could be less perfect. But, I mean, it's working, so, with a lot of conditions, so. Councilman Ledford and then Mr. Matthews.
Mr. Birch, would you be opposed to a condition of 1 story?
Oh, that's fine. Yeah. I'm not planning on doing any development there.
Mr. Matthews.
Mr. Chairman, you know, I too struggle with this fight. We go back and forth. This, UGC, we do need more tools, but under the circumstances, I believe this is a good fit. I move to approve with conditions and adding your condition on 1 story.
I'll second that.
So we do have a motion with the conditions from the RPA plus the additional condition of it being limited to 1 story. And it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Mr. Birch, just for, I do have a follow-up question, or maybe somebody can speak to this. What will the application process for a liquor license or a beer license be on that property?
Beer license goes through the beer board, to the police department. Liquor license, I also believe, goes through city council. But there is a restriction on that. I'm just not sure it's the city attorney's office. I don't know that they can issue any, nor, that's a liquor store, basically. So beer license goes in front of beer board.
And are those open for public comment?
Yes, they are.
Okay. And then that license would go with the current vendor? Is that right?
I think so.
I
don't know enough about it.
Business specific.
It's business specific?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just following up on that, we got some good training today. I'd like some training on C5 and the provisions for or against alcohol service related to zoning, maybe from staff at some point in the future. I'd kind of like to know why we have one zoning classification that doesn't allow alcohol consumption.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next case on the agenda is case 151. We're under new business now. And this is located at 4001 Rossville Boulevard. And it's an application to lift and amend conditions and has a staff recommendation to deny the applicant's request and approve an alternate from RPA. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? Are you agreeable to the conditions that RPA's presented? Absolutely. Okay. We have a motion to approve and I'm assuming that that was intended with the conditions that RPA had suggested. And that was properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, next case on the agenda is mandatory referral 2020-0016. This is located at 1617 Rossville Avenue, and it's a right-of-way abandonment and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? You're here in opposition? Yes, sir. And is the applicant present? All right. Mr. Schultz.
Yes, this is case MR 2016. The location of this request is 1600 block of Rossville Avenue and the 1600 block of Reed Avenue. This is giving you a view of where that property is. Here's Rossville Avenue, Main Street just to the north or left of the screen. This is Rossville Avenue, and here's the property right here. Talking about current zoning, we're going to talk about current zoning, permitted uses, and zoning history. This is currently zoned UCX4, Urban Commercial Mixed Use Zone, for this little strip of right-of-way or alley. In 2011, a portion of the existing right-of-way was closed by ordinance number 12632. The original request was to close all these alleys, but City Council only approved the closure of a portion of the alley to the south, which I'm highlighting on the screen. This was closed. The other two alleys remained opened. So the applicant was requesting to abandon and close a portion of this right-of-way. A stairwell was constructed in 2012. It's sticking 5 feet into the alley right-of-way. It's very small, very hard to see, but there is a stairwell that's constructed in the right-of-way. Staff recommends to approve. The applicant has demonstrated the public has no further need or interest to retain the right-of-way. A portion of the right-of-way has already been abandoned, so there's no need to retain the 5-foot section because it does not allow connectivity to other rights-of-way. The right-of-way does not provide existing or potential services or access to adjacent properties. Again, a portion of the right-of-way has already been closed by ordinance number 12632. This closure will not landlock any property. The adjacent properties have street frontage from Rossville Avenue and Reed Avenue, therefore it will not landlock any property. And then final question that we look at in street closures is the abandonment of right-of-way necessary to achieve a significant private or public interest? Abandoning the 5-foot section of right-of-way corrects an error from ordinance 12632 to allow an existing stairwell to be in compliance with local regulations on private properties. So staff recommends to approve the abandonment of this little 5-foot section of the right-of-way to get the stairwell out of the right-of-way and onto private land. So we'd recommend to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff? All right, we'll hear from the applicant first.
Good afternoon. I'm Jane DeBarge, and I am a tenant. I'm the commercial landowner of the condo unit that is in the bottom floor of a 6-unit condo association. This is Meg Cannon. She is the president of the HOA of Mountain City Lofts. I have owned that property since 2011 and operated a winery out of that property. The winery closed in December of 2016. And it was in getting another tenant into that space and him getting his CO that we found out that a plat had never been registered with RPC, and then they asked for these issues involving the property be clarified. I had Hopkins Survey come out and try to survey the property to give us that certification, and they couldn't do it because of the fact that the stairwell was sitting in an open alley. So we are actually asking for, according to Hopkins, they did a drawing for me and said that they needed 11.7 more feet of that alley to be closed to accommodate the stairwell that was placed in 2011 in the alley, in only half the alley. Of course, the alleys are 10 feet. We're only asking for the 5 feet where the stairwell is actually inside the alley. Do you have any questions for me?
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll hear from the opposition.
Good afternoon. My name's Robert Morris. We're the owners of the property just north of this alleyway located at 1601, 1607, and 1613 Rossville Avenue. We neighbor the property that's in question by the applicant. We did not file a letter of opposition with the RPA because we did not receive notification of this action. We just stumbled across the yellow sign, which is posted on Baldwin Street, which is not a typically traverse street. There was no notification posted on Rossville or Reed. While we might potentially have no objection to the alley closure as submitted per se, we nonetheless have some very serious concerns. The current request is for, and I quote, additional closure of an alleyway right-of-way to close a portion of a stairway that was built in 2012. Ordinance number 12632 did not close enough of the alley to accommodate the stairway. The fact is that the ordinance referenced was not requested to build a stairwell, but rather per case number MR 2011-042, application was made for, and I quote there, outdoor seating area for a winery and possible outdoor storage. None of these uses came to fruition, and instead, apparently, the staircase was built. Likewise, in 2012, the then husband of the applicant, Ray DeBarge, requested temporary use of a portion of the two adjoining alleys that intersect the 1600 block of Rossville Avenue for the installation of a pedestrian sidewalk, fence, and trellis along an alley center line, and instead a permanent staircase and a cinder block wall were constructed. So both these actions resulted in extension of the footprint of the applicant's property for purposes beyond the extent for what was approved by the city. We did notice back in the old days when it happened that there were surveys that took place. The property was staked and flagged and pegged. So it was hard for us to believe that the fairly large staircase, I don't know if you have a picture of it. I did bring one if you need it. You want one?
I do not. You can pass it out to Chris, maybe at the end.
The miracles of modern technology. And there's a bunch of other pictures here. These are the color 8x10 glosses with a paragraph on the back. Got to be old enough to remember that one. So we also notice that the alley in question faces a residential lot on Reed Avenue that at the time, you do get the joke, don't you? It ends on a residential property that faces Reed Avenue. That property is now titled to Ray DeBarge, as I understand, is the former husband of the applicant. This alley is frequently used by the applicant and her husband for contractors to access the residential lot at 1614 Reed because this alleyway provides the only flat access to the property, as the 1614 property ends on a stone wall and a raised property level. If this alleyway is enclosed and access is restricted, their only access to that property is going to be through, guess where, our property. So given we have some concerns, we question why Reed Avenue is listed in application block number 2 when the alleyway was not on Reed Avenue. But we don't object to approval if it is limited to the area specifically occupied by the existing staircase and does not permit any further extension, encroachment, or abandonment of the applicant's space into the existing right-of-ways. So that's where we stand. Some yes, some no.
We understand that it's probably going to be fairly impractical to tear down a large, expensive metal staircase, but that was not the purpose for which the city approved the closure of the part of the alleyway. Thank you.
Any questions for the opposition? All right, thank you. As the applicant, you have 2 minutes to respond.
I'm somewhat confused because that is not the only access to 1614 Reed Avenue. Robert and I share, or Robert and Mountain City Lofts share a 10-foot alley. If you can go to the picture that shows the 10-foot alley that is there, that has nothing to do with this alley. The alley which we share between this, to the north there, we share an alley, right, that is actual access onto 1614. Thank you. So there is no access to 1614 through this alley that we're asking to be closed. There is, all that's closed. There's no access. I was kind of confused by he's saying that it was the only flat access. And the reason we're only asking for 5 feet and not the whole alley to be closed, because we do appreciate the fact that 1616 Reed Avenue, which is a residential property, they park their car. They come in and use that alley to come in to a garage and into it. They've actually made a little parking pad there. And so by the recommendation of Brandon Sutton through CDOT, he said, let's just close 5 feet of it, thereby allowing access for 1616. 1614 has nothing. The 1614, as you can see on the picture, that alley has been totally closed to the back of 1614, so this does not impact 1614 Reed Avenue. That's already been closed. A little confused. Thank you.
Mr. Farmer.
Ms. Schultz, it's your opinion that this is cleaning up a previous case, that this should have been dealt with before in reading your comments?
That's the applicant's statement, not staff.
I thought I saw it in your comments.
No, but I think that's what the applicant provided us, that the alley closure did not go far enough to capture that stairwell.
Okay. And are you convinced that the application just encompasses the area of the staircase?
Yes, what was provided us, I have a site plan that shows the request. It's right through here.
Okay.
It's very hard to see on that screen, but those other 2 alleys, the applicant's correct, those have been closed. I mean, they're left open. The one behind this gentleman's property has been closed already.
Okay. And then the process would be, if this is approved, that the applicant would have to provide a survey.
Correct, and record that. This also goes on to CDOT for a more in-depth review, and then ultimately City Council make that decision.
Motion to approve the applicant's request.
We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is case 2020-0017. This is located at 121 Honest Street. It's an application to rezone from C2 Convenience Commercial Zone to M2 Light Industrial Zone, and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is case 2020-0018. This is an application at 1300 and 1500 block Workman Road. It's located at 4400 block of Walt Hall Avenue and 4400 block of Divine Avenue. And it's an application to rezone from R2 residential zone to M1 manufacturing zone, and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is mandatory referral 2020-0019, and this is located at the same address and is for a right-of-way abandonment and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 7 on our agenda has been withdrawn. Item 8 is case number mandatory referral 2020-0021. And this is located on Rossville Boulevard and is a right-of-way abandonment and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is case 2020-0022, and this is at the same address as the mandatory referral, but it's an application rezone from C2 Convenience Commercial Zone to M1 Manufacturing Zone, and staff has recommended that this case be denied, but approve M2 rather than M1. Is the applicant present? You are fine with it? Is there any opposition present? What's the will of the commission? We have a motion to approve the staff recommendation, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is mandatory referral 2020-0023. This is located at 300 block of Tucker Street. This is a right-of-way abandonment that has a staff recommendation to deny. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? Are you in opposition? You're the applicant. So you're certainly in opposition to the staff recommendation. So if you don't mind, start making your way up to this podium, and we'll hear from staff.
Okay. This is MR 2020-23. That's for a street closure. Location of this request is North Chattanooga in the 300 block of Tucker Street. You can see Tucker Street just to the right of the screen and Tremont Street to the right. Top left of the picture is a notification sign. Top right is a view looking down Tucker Street. The site is just on the left-hand side. And then the bottom left is a view of the site itself, and this is Tucker Street. It's currently zoned R3, which is allows residential uses, a multifamily. This is the property right here where the request is to be abandoned, the road to be abandoned. There is some zoning history on this property, actually right next door on this property. You might remember this alley goes all the way through, or this road goes all the way through to Tremont. We've had several requests over the years to close that alley or right-of-way. Staff recommended approval in 2019 to abandon that right-of-way. This application was withdrawn by the applicant at City Council. The applicant is requesting to abandon and close a portion of a right-of-way, which is actually in Tucker Street, to build a home. This is a very steep lot in the rear, so they're wanting to abandon the right-of-way to add that to the property. Therefore, it shifts the home off the steep slopes and closer to the level part of the property. Staff recommendation is to deny based on the following reasons. The applicant has demonstrated the public has no further need or interest to retain the right-of-way. Our response to that is there is a need to retain the right-of-way in order to ensure the right-of-way maintains a width of 50 feet to meet city standards for public health and safety. Second question we look at, is the abandonment right-of-way necessary to achieve a significant private or public interest? The right-of-way is necessary to retain for public use. There are other avenues the applicant can explore in order to construct a house, such as applying for setback variances through BOZA in order to move the house closer to Tucker Street. Third question, does the right-of-way provide existing or potential service or access to adjacent properties? The right-of-way allows for the expansion of Tucker Street for road maintenance or sidewalk improvements? And finally, the last question, will this closure landlock any property? All adjacent properties have access or street frontage on Tucker Street. Again, staff's primary concern was if you close this portion of the right-of-way, that right-of-way is significantly reduced to below 50 feet, so staff recommends to deny this request.
Mr. Farmer?
So, Brian, what they're requesting, if I go back to that, is right up against Tucker Street, is that correct?
Correct. Looks like it goes right up to the pavement edge.
Okay. I mean, water, sewer, EPB, I mean, there's some pretty big people that have easements to that right of way.
Right.
Typically, right?
We didn't get any comment. We always send these to utility companies. As of right now, we have not received any comments from them. If there are, utilities typically require easements to go on that right-of-way that's being abandoned. But you're right, that's the main concern, and maybe CDOT can speak specifically to that. By abandoning this portion of the right-of-way, you're significantly reducing that right-of-way.
Right. Thank you.
I'm happy to address. Mr. Farmer? Mr. Chairman? Yeah, we typically do utility cards. They may come in after the planning cases.
Yeah.
Typically what happens is CDOT's involved for a preliminary recommendation, and then after the planning commission goes back through our department, and we prepare it for city council. And at that time, we review utilities. So that, I think, clarifies your question. And I'll just add, I think our concern was that it wasn't clear how we would maintain. There may be something here that could be a compromise. I think we need more than what is being requested to be abandoned. Somewhere between their existing property and where they're asking for it, maybe there's a sweet spot here where all the utilities can still be managed, and this can be accommodated. And I'm not going to go address that now, but I would request that we get more clarity on that between now and the city council meeting.
That's actually my proposal as I make my comments. So.
I'm sorry to take your.
Oh no, that's okay. So I have some pictures first of all that you guys can pass around, and then this is a revised drawing of what we're asking for that speaks to what the gentleman was talking about. My name's Thomas Kutu, and this is my wife, Laura Knight. We have been residents of Chattanooga in the past. We moved away for about 6.5 years, and we moved back here to make a retirement home. And we purchased lot 338 on Tucker Street. Until now, this lot, and at least this lot, and the adjacent lot has been used for the last close to 14 years by a homeless individual, and you'll see that in the pictures. It's also kind of become an area for dumping. You'll see some pictures of Christmas trees that have been dumped down there, trash that's been dumped down there. It is very steep on the lower side of Tucker Street. I'm providing revised drawing to depict the actual abandonment that we're requesting. When I submitted that drawing, I assumed that even if we were granted an abandonment, we would be held to the standard rights of way. And I didn't understand that by supplying that drawing, I would mislead anybody into thinking we needed additional right-of-way. So the drawings, I've since met with Joe Beeler and Shannon Mikas of CDOT. And CDOT states in the application, in their review of the application, that they don't generally object to this, as long as a 50-foot right-of-way is maintained from the lot lines across Tucker Street. So Tucker Street's a narrow one-way street. The existing right-of-way below the intersection of Tucker and Kent Streets. So on the lower side, that lower intersection right there is only 40 feet. Per the zoning and regulation policies in the discussion in here, basically there have been 2 previous cases for abandonment of portions of this right-of-way. Both were approved, and both were then later withdrawn by the applicants. In part, the latest one was withdrawn because the neighbors did not want that alleyway turned into a walkway. They were worried that it would bring in undesirable behavior and stuff like that. So that was withdrawn by the applicant, who's developing property further back, down on Tremont Street, and further back up Tucker Street. The city stated that the most recent ban case also, at not the abandonment case, but at a form-based code committee meeting, that the slope of the right-of-way was too steep for it to be usable by the city for any improvement. The slope of the land on the lower side of Tucker Street, which is the side that our lot is on, is significant. It's almost an immediate drop-off from the roadway. That first picture that you see will show that it's a straight, almost 6-foot drop down to the right-of-way, from the roadway down to the right-of-way. So for the city to do anything with that, and it only gets steeper as you go down Tucker Street. The only place where there would be room for expansion of the roadway would be on the lots that are above, going up towards the intersection of Katrina and Tucker Street, or Katrina is also known as East Manning Street. So to expand the roadway on that side, the city would incur considerable cost. There would have to be retaining walls put in or significant fill put in to be able to expand the roadway on that side of Tucker Street. In the other department comments, as I've said, that CDOT, and in talking with them, they don't generally object to this request as long as 50-foot minimum right-of-way is retained for public use along Tucker Street. So the drawings that I sent across show that that right-of-way varies anywhere from about 67 feet to about 78 feet, pretty close. And I tried to depict that we would allow maintenance of the 50-foot right-of-way and request abandonment of only that portion of the right-of-way that would allow us to move the house further up the hill, maintain separation from the house below us. So this lot was subdivided many years ago, and there's a house on the lot below it, unlike some of the lots on Tremont Street, which extend all the way up to Tucker Street. So CDOT also stated in our meeting that they might want to expand the right-of-way on the upper portion by the intersection of Tucker Street and Katrina Streets to 60 feet. I don't really understand the need for that, quite frankly, because of the steepness of the lot, although it does level out up there, and they could make some use of making a larger intersection, because I think that the right-of-way on the opposite side of the Katrina Street goes to 60 feet. We would be amenable to working with CDOT to draw some sort of gradual line or some line that makes sense for them to have a right-of-way of greater than 50 feet if they deem it necessary. But quite frankly, I don't know what you could use that side of the roadway for, that right-of-way on that side of the roadway for. We do want to build a retirement home there. We've shown you what the lots and the adjacent lots kind of look like now, and we think that this will only add to the character of the community along with any other developments that are currently being planned in the area. So we're hoping that the staff will reconsider and grant the approval as now proposed on the drawings that I sent out.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Mr. Mabey?
Yes, I have a quick question for staff. If, as is revised here in this, his updated request to maintain a 50-foot right-of-way, would that have changed y'all's recommendation or had an impact on your recommendation?
I believe we would have looked more favorable on it because we would have got to maintain the right-of-way for accessibility for the street at the time. Yes.
Based on that, I'll make I'm trying to think of the best way to word this, a motion to allow an abandonment up to a point that maintains a 50-foot right-of-way. But I think you're going to have to get some more detail before City Council surveying work, because there's going to be a lot that goes into that before they can. Thank you.
So we have a motion, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Next case on the agenda is case 2020-0024. It's located approve. And it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is case 2020-0025. It's located at 5213 Wilson Avenue. This is in the town of Walden and is an application to rezone from A1 agricultural zone to R1 residential zone and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve. Did I hear a second? And it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is case 2020-0026. This is located at 1010 Georgia Avenue, and it's an application to rezone UCX6 Urban Commercial Mixed Use Zone to DCX6 Downtown Commercial Mixed Use Zone, and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is case 2020-0027. This is located at 7437, 7443, and 7445 Shelford Road, and 2301 Rivendell Lane. That's application to rezone from R1 residential zone and RTZ to C2 convenience commercial zone and RTZ.
Mr. Chairman, staff did receive an email from the applicant today wishing to defer for 30 days.
Is there any opposition present? All right. Well, what we'll do, because there's opposition here, I'm assuming you're the applicant?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Because we've got opposition here and they've been sitting here for an hour and 48 minutes, 2 hours and 48 minutes. They've been sitting here a while. We're going to hear from them today.
Sure.
So we understand that you've asked to defer for 30 days. Is that correct?
It is correct. May I make a comment?
I'd like to, yes, but keep it brief because I'd like to hear.
My name's Guy Cherwanick. I'm with Paces Ferry Builders. On February 4th, we had a meeting with the neighborhoods group at the YMCA. We got some great feedback. We're committed to working with the neighbors. We understand the importance of responsible development, and part of that is to listen to the neighbors. And we're in the process right now of setting up a meeting with the Rivendell Homeowners Association. They've invited us to participate at their next board meeting, and we'll also address all the other issues to the best that we can with all the neighbors.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Having heard that, do y'all want to speak today, or do y'all want to speak when it comes back up to Planning Commission? Because you do know that this is going to come back in some number of days if we defer it. Okay. Did you say you do want to speak today? Is that right? Okay. Well, what we'll do is we'll hear from staff first, then we'll give the applicant an opportunity to speak, and then you'll have the opportunity to speak.
Okay, this is case 2020-27. Location of this request is out by Hamlin Place Mall. Here's Gun Barrel Road just to the left. Here's Shalford Road. Here's the property. It's about 13 acres in size. Top left is a view of the notification sign. Top right is a view of the site itself. Bottom left is a view of the site itself looking from Shalford Road. Then bottom right is a view looking across from the site along Shalford Road. Currently zoned R1 and a little portion of RTZ that sits right here. There is some zoning history of this site. A portion of this site was rezoned from R1 to RTZ in 2004, which I'm indicating on the screen. This is his bottom right-hand side. That was rezoned to from R1 to RTZ with condition. And then 7429 Shalford Road was rezoned from O1 to R4 with landscape standard conditions in 1998, which is just to the left of this site. Just a reminder what some of the R1 permitted uses are. That's single-family dwellings, schools, playgrounds, golf courses, daycares, planned unit developments, and residential home for the handicapped and/or aged persons. The RTZ allows single-family dwellings, townhouses, zero lot line dwellings. And then we're going to look at this site in relation to adjacent land uses. This is, again, the site itself. To the north of this site is attached single-family dwellings. To the right of the site is attached single-family dwellings, and further right is assisted living facility. To the south or across the street from the site is commercial and office. And to the left or the west is detached single-family and assisted living. Adjacent zoning is RT1 to the north, RTZ and R4 and R1 to the east. And to the south, you have C2, R4, and C4. And then to the west is R4. Further west is O1 and O1. So there's a hodgepodge of different zonings around this property. This property, there are no floodplains or steep slopes on this property. So we're now going to look at the applicant request. The applicant request is to rezone from R1 and RTZ to C2 and RTZ for this particular site for proposed use of office, residential, and commercial. Some of the C2 permitted uses are retail sales and service establishments, bakeries, any type of market, bowling alleys, office buildings, vehicle repair facilities, motels, hotels, funeral homes, liquor stores. Again, our C2 is our most permitted permitted zone. It allows a wide range of uses. It also has a landscape provision of a type B, which is 20-foot landscape buffer required where abutting any residential zone. Again, the applicant's also asking for RTZ. The RTZ zone allows for single-family dwellings, townhomes, and zero lot line dwellings. There is also a landscape provision of a 10-foot landscape buffer required where abutting any low residential zone, which would be R1. This is in the Hamlin Place Mall land use plan, which is described as medium density residential at this location. That classification describes as detached single-family homes, townhomes and patio homes, and 3 and 4 family dwellings if the density is compatible. The plan also states that based on the retail market analysis done at the time of this plan, and neighborhood concern, commercial neighborhood boundaries should be maintained as defined by the land use plan. While the proposed townhome development is compatible with the plan recommendations, the commercial portion is not. So from all that information, we come up with a staff recommendation. The residential use of the request is compatible with adopted land use plan and adjacent uses. The commercial use and zone are in conflict with the plan recommendations to hold commercial development to the existing locations. Staff also had a concern with additional traffic impacts to the existing road network with the addition of commercial uses. And staff also had a concern with the continuation of commercial strip development to the east on Shalford Road on the northern side of Shalford Road. So staff recommended to deny the applicant's request but recommend RTZ for the entirety of the site. So staff recommends to deny the applicant's request and approve other.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. We'll hear from the applicant, and if you want to speak briefly. Primarily, we want to hear from opposition, but if you'd like to come up and say something, we'd be happy to hear from you.
I've said what I was going to say, just that we're working with the neighbors. We had a good meeting in the YMCA, 25 people attended, and we're committed to working with the neighbors.
And it is your desire to
Defer for 30 days.
For 30 days, thank you. All right, we'll hear from opposition.
I do have a handout that I'd like to. Oh, well, so much for that. Let's see. Make sure I didn't give out my last handout. Okay. My name is Craig Serene, and I thank you for allowing us to present before the commission. We have met. We attended the meeting the other evening, and we have met with the applicants, and they seem like nice people. A key difference is that they don't live here. We do live here. Again, my name is Craig Serene. I'm a resident of the Preston Circle, and in your packet on page 1, The yellow dot on there is where our house is. So as you can see, we're pretty close to the project. On behalf of myself and my neighbors, we do have a petition that we passed around the neighborhood. We have 29 signatures on it, and I believe it didn't make it here today, but we do have that available if that would be beneficial. But we want to oppose this project, and it all boils down from our standpoint to what I see as an extension of a commercial and urban sprawl into a neighborhood that we've been there for 10 years, and a number of people in our neighborhood have been there for about 60 years, since the neighborhood was built way back before Hamilton Place Mall, and most of that out there was farmland. So I've already pinpointed the current location. Page 2 depicts the zoning, the current zoning of the area, and it's, as you can see, the applicant's space is way to the left of that drawing, and you can see that all the yellow in there is all R1 zoning, which is what we're wanting to maintain in that area. The first issue that we have is nuisances. I've heard that word come up several times in here, and it sounds like it is indeed a legitimate complaint that there are noises and lights. We've experienced the vast development of that waterside development right across Gun Barrel from us, and the lights from Drake's shine into our neighborhood. The noise during the summer, they have outdoor concerts or whatever they have going on over there, and that goes on well into the evening. We just believe that we would like to have the quiet enjoyment that we have had for that property for many people in the neighborhood, 60 years. The second issue is traffic. At present, the minor arterial roads, as was identified in the staff report, that type of road, which is what passes by on Shallowford there, is recommended that it carry a load of 14,000 trips per day. And we're currently at about 16,469 plus or minus, and with this project it will exceed 17,900, which is fully 28% above the designed or the desired capacity of that road. There's an accident rate there. My wife told me there's 450 accidents in the last 3 years. So we're what happens is when you concentrate all those cars, you know what happens. People get frustrated and angry and in a hurry, and they get in accidents, and that's what's happening there. That intersection at Gun Barrel and Shallowford is more active and more accident prone than East Brainerd and Gun Barrel, which is a very busy intersection in and of itself. Anybody who's traveled out there around the holidays between Thanksgiving and New Year's knows what I'm talking about. Compatibility, the design and the density of the residential plans presented are not consistent with the surrounding area. I don't know if the applicant submitted drawings, but on their website, we pulled some drawings, and that's actually on page 3. And I recognize that these are conceptual drawings. It's something that they have on their website. But as you look at it, you can see that it's something that you might see in the urbanized South Side Chattanooga area, not in a residential area such as our neighborhood. Page 4 shows some pictures. We just drove around, took some pictures of the RTZ zones around our area. And it's all just classic design and architecture, and that's what we would like to see maintained in that part of our of town. The fourth issue is stormwater, and this is something that's near and dear to us, in that there's a creek. You can see they've got it as green space in there. There's a creek that runs through there, and it's labeled on some of the drawings that I have called an unnamed tributary to Friar Branch. That's what it's called, and we're not in a flood zone. as was depicted by the staff members. We are not in a flood zone, but I can tell you, we flood. And we've gone through, since we've been there in 10 years, I believe 7 instances where that creek has risen above the banks and to the back of our house and filled our crawl space with 5 feet of water, even though we're not in a flood zone. That's the biggest problem. The best drawings that I can have show that about 280 acres of land runoff runs through our backyard and runs through that. The continuation of that, I don't know if you have a drawing. If you flip back to the to the page 1 in here, you'll see that our house, you can take my word for it, that it runs through there. Converting this land from its current just completely wooded area and wooded space to a space that you can see, I believe, on page 5. You can look at the drawing and just see the density of the rooftops. Every time you put in a rooftop and every time you put in a paved area, water runs off instead of soaking into the ground. And I've looked into runoff coefficients and all that, and I won't bore you with a bunch of that. But the runoff coefficient is going to change by a factor of at least 2, the way that I calculate it. In recent years, the developers have had to, the laws have changed to where developers have to capture a certain amount of rainwater on their lot. And I see that they have on their drawings, they have the ability to capture rainwater. The problem with that is that that's a minimum standard. And the problem that's happened is, over time, before those standards were adopted, the system was already overrun before we got into the current situation where we have the current law. And so what's happened is that with all these additions, every time there is an excessive rain, and we all know that we have those around here, where we have a heavy rain where you get an inch of rain in an hour, when that comes through there, the water, that's when we have problems in our backyard. This project is going to increase those problems. In the strongest terms, we request that you make sure that there is a drainage and runoff engineering plan for this area. Page 7 shows, page 6. I'll go to page 6. Page 6 shows what happens when the water rises in our area. You can see there's a rug in the kitchen of one of our neighbors' houses floating around the kitchen. There's a water line at the outside of the house. There's a house that is virtually encircled by water, and then the last lower right-hand corner, that's our backyard. When the water floods, it floods right up to the house and into the crawl space. That house in the lower left-hand corner, back in July of 2012, was completely encircled by water. There was no access in and out, and the fire department had to come to get the people out of the house. Is that my time?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
So when were these pictures taken?
These pictures were probably within the last 4 or 5 years.
Okay. Hopefully they fared okay last week.
It ran to the capacity of the system. So the pipe that goes under our road was at capacity and did not breach into our backyard. So it's an intensity issue. So we can get 3 inches of rain over the course of a day, and it'll be fine. But if we get 1 inch in an hour, then we have a problem.
Wow.
And this, it's our belief that this project is going to just add to those problems.
Thank you.
So, any questions?
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Defer 30 days. I do have one question. We have a motion to defer for 30 days, and it has been seconded.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Chairman, this is in my
Councilman
district,
Ledford.
and I'd like to weigh in. To the applicant, I have a quick question. Do you think 30 days is going to be enough? to iron out some very long list of concerns.
Can I let you know in a week?
No, you need to let me know now. I would rather make a deferral up to 90 days if possible to give you time to.
I think 30 days. We'll know where we are.
That's pretty bold. Okay. So one of the other concerns, I've been looking into this project, this is from a non-zoning perspective. We need to look at what TDEC has to say, and we also need to check with the Corps of Engineers. I've been made aware of a lot of issues in the topography, the streams, obviously the flooding, but from a zoning position, I think we need to be realistic in that this is at a major intersection. It is at Shallowford and Ogletree, one of a very enticing place for development, and to place an R1 neighborhood, I think is to be honest with you, unreasonable expectation. The townhomes, just like it is in Rivendell, is a much more appealing process. Also, with being right there at that location, I think you have a natural demarcation line with where things move down the road as far as C2. So I think that intersection is a natural for a C2. Now, that's what goes there is obviously the next part. That's why I'm really kind of leaning on a longer deferral, because I think there's a lot more conversation to have here, a little more information that the residents can be provided, and 30 days is pretty interesting to try to pull that off.
I agree, 60 days.
And I just would like to allow you more time to iron it out. So, but that being said, I appreciate, I love Preston Circle. I'm in there a lot. I drive around. I feel you. I hear you. I want to make sure this is right. I think the applicant wants to make it right. I believe when they say that they do. So let's go with if I may make the amendment up to 60-day deferral, I would support that and second that.
We have an amended motion, and it has been seconded to defer for 60 days. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is mandatory referral 2020-0028. This is located at 2210 Fagan Street and 1928 Central Avenue. This is a mandatory referral to abandon a right-of-way and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? What's the will of the commission?
Second.
We have a motion to approve, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is case 2020-0029. This is located at 4560 Webb Road and is a special permit for a residential plan unit development. And this has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? Mr. Schultz.
Yes, this is case 2020-29. Location of this request is at 4560 Webb Road. Here's Champion Road to the right, Highway 58, just the bottom right, and then here's Webb Road. You can see the property here. It's about just 59.9 acres in size. Top left is a picture of the notification sign. Top right is some of the homes that are across the street, across Webb Road from the site. Bottom left is a view of the entrance to the site, and then the bottom right is a view looking at the site from Webb Road. It's currently zoned R1, residential. There is some zoning history on the adjacent properties. In 2006, a residential PUD in the 4500 block of Webb Road was approved with a maximum density of 4 dwelling units per acre. Then in 2008, that PUD was revised, changing some of the density to 5 dwelling units per acre. Approval of fire marshal for ingress and egress shall be subject to traffic city engineer. And again, that PUD was revised again in 2015 for townhomes and 5 dwelling units per acre. That is this property just to the left of this site. In 2018, directly across the street from this property, for Webb Road, there was a new PUD for this particular property. It had conditions on that property as well. Just a reminder of what the R1 uses are. It's single-family dwellings, schools, parks, playgrounds, golf courses, daycares, assisted living facilities, etc. Adjacent uses to this property, again, this piece of property is a vacant, wooded piece of property. To the north is detached single-family. To the southeast is detached single-family. Then to the southwest is detached single-family. And then to the west is attached single-family and detached single-family dwellings. Adjacent zoning, this property is zoned, again, zoned R1. To the north is R1. Northeast is C4, C5. And to the east is R4. To the south is R1. And to the west is R1 with a PUD. And then to the southwest is R1 with a PUD. This site does not have any floodplains, but it is located in a steep slope area. So I'm showing on the map here where the property is in relation to the steep slopes. Some of the slopes in this general property are 25% and greater. Applicant request, again, this is not a rezoning. This is a special exceptions permit for a planned unit development. The purpose is proposed single-family detached dwellings. The acreage is 59.9 acres. Proposed number of lots is 103 lots with a density of 1.72 dwelling units per acre. And some of the uses, they do change when you do a PUD. The PUD allows single-family dwellings, two-family dwellings, multifamily, and townhomes. The PUD has a 25-foot setback perimeter from the PUD, 25-foot setback from PUD perimeter, and 10-foot between freestanding structures. This is in the Highway 58 Community Plan, which is adopted in 2002. That plan recommends low-density residential, which is typically 1 to 4 dwelling units per acre. We go back to the PUD plan. Again, this is the PUD plan that was submitted. They're not actually accessing the site from Webb Road. They're accessing it from an adjacent residential development. Webb Road is just right here to the left, top left. And here's the existing subdivision. They're tying into existing road with the two cul-de-sacs. Large portion of this property is in the steep slope area. They're leaving that as open space on the site plan or PUD plan, and on the PUD plan it's all single-family dwellings. So the staff recommendation is to approve with a condition. The request is compatible land use plan. It is compatible with adjacent land uses and surrounding development form. And in order to preserve the mature tree canopy and sensitive topography, staff recommends a condition to limit clearing and grading on the site. So staff recommends to approve subject to the following condition: no grading or clearing on community lots except for pedestrian paths, trails, proposed detention areas, or the clearing of invasive or dead species or debris. And here's the PUD plan. I'll leave it on the screen to show you what that looks like.
All right. Everybody's thinking it? Mr. Farmer? I mean, can you give me some more thought on that staff recommendation? I mean, that's very new, I feel like. No grading or clearing on community lots except for pedestrian paths, trails, proposed detention areas, and so
We've
on.
had that same condition on several PUDs in the past. We've had one out on Georgetown Road. We've had one on Appleson Pike. We've used this quite frequently.
You've used that statement before?
Yeah, pretty much word for word.
They just normally put it with 10 other conditions, so you don't see.
You miss it in all those other conditions, but that is normal language we've been using.
Can I offer, and the reason for that, Mr. Farmer, is in a lot of cases, particularly I know some cases we had in the Hickson area where you've got a ridge and it wasn't clear about what you do with the community lot, it gets cleared afterwards, and that caused a lot of problems downstream. And so we're being real clear about the intent. Hey, if it's a community lot to be undisturbed, then we need the language to make sure that it's not just graded and cleared.
Because right now, he can clear this, you can clear the whole community lot with no, you just submit your plans and get a grading permit and clear it.
I think it's probably fair right now, he can clear the whole site.
Yes, he can, but he's asking for a PUD, so with that, you can potentially get conditions placed on it.
So if he cleared it first and then came back and asked for the flood, it would?
We probably wouldn't have a condition because there's no trees there. If you look at the topography based on the aerial map, it's a pretty mature vegetation in this, right back through here.
But
So that's why we're
but
trying to
just
protect.
so you know, Barry, you can't do that because you won't get. You can't get a land disturbance permit if you clear a lot, and then if you do mass clearing. I wish John were still here. I don't think you can get a land disturbance permit within 5 years of mass clearing. So.
Well, I know tree preservation is 3.
For timber harvest.
Is that what it is?
Timber's 3. This thing is 3 years.
Is it?
Yeah.
Mr. Price?
Mike Price, MAP Engineers. I solemnly swear my client will not clear cut the site. With that, we have a proposed PUD. The density, as staff has noted, is that our density is under 2 units per acre, and our entrance is coming off of Waterstone Drive, so there will not be an additional entrance off of Webb Road. Given that we have over 30 acres left as community property, I'd like to reserve the rest of my time and hear what opposition has to say so I can maybe better address those questions. I will say that I have talked to the Homeowners Association agent for the Rock Creek River Rock Cove, subdivision, and have talked with the developer of the Waterstone subdivision as well, and have had a couple of phone conversations with some other area residents that had questions. So with that, be happy to, if I might, just reserve the rest of my time until after opposition speaks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Price. We'll hear from opposition.
My name is Don Alosi, and I live in the Waterstone Ridge subdivision, and we were unaware of this. I read the sign and wasn't sure what was going on, and then some of our neighbors in there received a letter notifying of this meeting and what was going on, and we just got the copy of the plat, what's going in there, just recently. Even Mr. Price talked about, he talked to the developer there. When we called one of the developers, talked to him, he had no idea that this subdivision was going to be through the entrance of our subdivision. So what we're concerned about is the traffic that's going to come in there. Is anybody familiar with Webb Road? Okay, there's a lot of school bus stops there, and this is going to increase that traffic there. There's a lot of little kids that run around there, and just recently the road was repaved, which was nice, but when they did the manhole coverage, they did like a inverted pothole, so it's pretty bumpy there. But if we're going to go through with this, then I would strongly recommend speed bumps on Webb Road. That could be considered, but also maybe a turnoff. I wasn't sure if he was going to talk about turnoffs, going into the subdivision or anything like that, but we just worried about all that traffic that's coming in there. I did have a list. Okay, we talked about new homes. I think they said 103. Is that correct? And I wasn't sure if this is going to be phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Is there going to be other phases other than this first one? Does anybody know that? 103 total. That's it? Okay. All right. That's all I have.
Hi, my name is Brooke Mitchell. I live at 5122 Athey Lane. Sir, could I ask you to go back to the red, that one. So if you look at the little inverted U on the left side there, yeah, that's us. We moved here about 2 years ago. We bought an acre of land. We thought it would be a really awesome place to raise our daughter. And so far, everything's been really good except for the drainage issues that we've had with Waterstone, which we're working with them to fix with our property. My husband should show you a video of just yesterday of their retention pond overflowing. Now, this particular development is directly uphill from us, and it comes directly through our property. Waterstone uses the retention pond directly next to our property, and this development which Waterstone, again, we're working with them to rectify civilly. This new development with the gradient of the land would just pretty much make our property unlivable. So it creates a huge safety concern, and with the retention pond directly next to our house, most of the water, like it can't even hold the water that's currently there. So, yeah, that's about it.
My name is Mike Mannion. As my wife was saying, since Waterstone has gone up, we've had significant issues with the drainage and the floodwater. Part of our street has washed away. My wife farms on about a half acre, which is almost unusable when we have any more than a light rain. It has become basically swampland. We are in our own little valley there. There's only 4 houses on our street, and all 4 of them are affected tremendously by the water and the flooding. And as my wife said, it's a very steep gradient, and we can see all the houses from Waterstone at least a few hundred feet up, at least. And whenever it rains with any significance, it is a huge, huge problem. And I fear that with this new development, it won't only flood our property, but could destroy our home and the slab underneath our home. And that's what we're really, really concerned about. I have a video on my phone I'd like to show you of just the other day, and you can see how part of our property has just become a water feature at this point and is just unusable. And we also had a sinkhole that cracked our water line. We have a shallow well that we rely on for our 2-year-old daughter, and that's everything we have there. And we had a sinkhole crack the actual water line that we had to have replaced, which was $2,000 just to get water to our home. So the situation is bad now, and that is only going to amplify tremendously with this new development going in. So I would just like to request from you very steep regulations and conditions that they handle the drainage, and not only the new development, but Waterstone as well, to vastly improve the drainage, because it all runs through us on the way to the lake. And I'd like to just show you some videos here, if I may. And again, that's all we're looking for. We're just trying to preempt the inevitable here. We have no problem with the development going in, with all the single-family homes. We're a single family. But we do fear it causing great damage and devaluation to our property, making it not only unusable but unsellable. And yeah, so we really appreciate your time, and thank you. Yeah, I'll come grab it. Sure, absolutely.
Mr. Price?
My card's saved.
For him? Yes. Councilman Ledford has a question.
Thank you, Chairman. Mike, I'm a little confused. I'm looking at the property of their home, and the development is on right above them, or is it on the other side of the hill?
It is, if you take the red dot and shift it more, you're more up in that area.
That's their home, right?
Up there where the red dot currently is.
Right. And that slopes down from the development straight down into their
Stone as well. There's roughly, I know, at least 40 acres that drains into there. So they're sort of at the low point where these swells converge before it makes its way into the lake. So they're in a belly right in through there, so to speak, currently.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Mr. Price, can you speak to how this development would impact runoff onto their property?
Yes. So the good thing about this development, which is, again, roughly about 60 acres, and so our plan is to leave over 30 of it alone as far as community lots. So in terms of impact, they'll see less impact than a typical standard development. For instance, Waterstone, when it went in, pretty much graded the entire site. It was a mass grading. We won't be doing that. So essentially, we sit up on top of the ridge. Everything will then be drained from there, heading downstream. Again, that's the natural flow of water. We're going to continue that. The idea is to use the community space for our detention. So that's where we'll be doing both water quality and detention in those areas, but again, leaving as many of the trees and existing vegetation in place. So that's how I would say that we would be addressing as it relates to runoff. I do understand Don and comments on, where's Don? There he is. I do understand as far as on traffic. We'll simply defer to CDOT, but I probably don't think that CDOT's going to let us put traffic tables out on Webb Road, given the amount of traffic would be my guess out of that. If I might, I'd like to go back to where the discussion first started. Let me first state that steep slopes, to my understanding, no definition has yet been determined, and it's a little premature of RPA to come up with 25% since I don't remember City Council voting on anything at this point. If you want to state that there's undetermined parameters of steep slopes, I get it, but just to assume 25% is the number, that's, again, I think jumping the gun a little bit. Just thought I would point that out. What I would also point out is, while I'm in agreement with the fact that we're going to use community space for items such as detention and leaving it as open area for people to enjoy, the language here is a little overly restrictive, and here's why. Roads. I'm going to be developing some roads in through here that will impact part of those steep slopes community lot area. I'll also be having to build retaining walls along the back of several houses that may fall in the community lot or adjacent to it that I wouldn't be able to grade. I won't be able to replant based upon the way that this is written if I wanted to plant something, which I probably do. I'll need to construct access roads to my detention ponds so that we'll have the ability to get down there and deal with them. I can't do that with this. I can't put any utilities in through here if I need to do that. I can't put any storm drainage piping. So what I would simply say is this. Look, we're not planning on grading the community lot area. We don't have any reason to. It's an unnecessary expense. We want to do as little as we can. But I don't need to be hamstrung in terms of how I engineer this. So what I would ask is that we be able to pass the PUD, understand the density is 103 units. We're going to be less than 2 units per acre. But don't hamstring me by tying me up in terms of what I can and can't do and trying to develop language. We understand what needs to be done, and we'll do it. But I don't think that that particular language works as written. So other than that, if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Any questions for the applicant? Councilman Ledford. Ma'am. I'm sorry, ma'am. The time for opposition is over. I'm sorry. Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Chairman. So, Mike, when you say you're going to do as little as possible, I don't. Let's be clear. You're going to do as little disturbance as possible?
A little disturbance. For instance,
okay.
We want to put in the detention facilities in the community lots because that's at the bottom of the area. We want to put in water quality filtration in that area. So we plan on using those areas, but we don't. The more we impact, the more I have to do engineering-wise, the more we have to do cost-wise to construct it. So we want to leave as much of that is in its present state as possible. But as this is written, it restricts me too much.
Okay. And then I always ask this question at council because I think it's important, so I'll ask it here. What is the density as it sits by right at the moment?
We can do up to 5 units per acre is my understanding.
5 units per acre. Thank you. The PUD is restricting you to?
Less than 2. Less
than 2. Okay. I always like those math numbers because it tells me a lot. And, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I want to make a comment, if I may. I just want to reiterate again for community lots, we look at trying to protect clearing and grading is where you have an existing natural resource like a wood area, and so we're just doing our part in terms of balancing development with conservation of resources. So when there's an existing asset or natural resource that we're trying to protect, and it's clear that the intent was to protect it, we're trying to create some language because currently our PUDs don't provide those protections. So That's the reason we provide it. Of course, you all have to deliberate and determine what's appropriate for each case, but that's how we do it. We don't do that for every case. We only do that when we know there's an area that's got some sensitive resources like
floodplains or.
Yep.
And if I misspoke, I don't think I said 25% is existing topography, not that we're using that as our rule.
I don't know, I took it right there.
Yeah, that's existing topography.
Yes, but you used it in steep slopes after that definition. That was why.
This came from comp plan too. If I said steep slopes, I apologize. It was not saying that that's our number.
Mr. Price, in light of John's comment in regards to the intent of RPA and the intent of the developer, they're not far off.
No, I agree.
And so, I think you've made your point that the language doesn't allow the flexibility for you to be able to use that common space for some of the purposes. But the intent and the purpose behind a PUD is conservation of certain spaces.
Yes.
And to allow greater density in other spaces. So when that space is set aside, it's important for the planning agency to be able to say, okay, if it's set aside, then here's what we would expect for it to look like in its future. What might you propose as some appropriate language to address that concern that we should have with PUDs? Just both now in regards to this specific condition, but then also in the future to allow that flexibility to be able to, develop it to some extent, but not mass grading, not mass clearing, and those sorts of things.
My suggestion would be is in the future, if RPA has this as a recommendation, contact the applicant and let's have a dialogue, because this language is appropriate in certain instances where I don't plan on having any impacts. Where I do plan on having impacts, that's where there needs to be a dialogue to figure out how that language works, is what I would first point out. As it relates to that, what I would say is that grading activities to be limited to construct the development has proposed and to provide ongoing ability to maintain those areas in the community space has required. I think then that, and while limiting, and again, that's a broad term, I don't know how you put a definition on it, but again, while trying to limit the amount of impacts in the community lot. That's really the intent, that's the desire. And maybe between now and City Council, we can figure out exactly what that looks like. I'm comfortable with that if everybody else is.
Thank you. Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Chairman. Mike, if you don't mind to get with Councilman Smith, I know he has a strong interest and has been watching this case, and involve him in that conversation. I think that would be fantastic.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Price, I do have one other question for you. These folks came out, sat here today, expressed their concern about stormwater and how their property is currently flooding. And, I would like for you, in layman's terms, to explain to these people how state law requires that, if my understanding is correct, state law requires that the runoff post-development not exceed that of pre-development.
That is correct.
And, the detention ponds aren't there right now, and I don't want to say anything that's out of line in regards to state law or city regulations, but those detention ponds aren't there right now. And so on their development. Right. And so there are no detention ponds on their development right now. They're going to put in streets and impervious surfaces, and their responsibility is to capture that water. And you have to capture the water from the roads and the lots. You have to put it in that pond, and then you release it out of that pond over a certain period of time. And how long is that?
Well, it varies, but the the pre-construction runoff rate cannot be exceeded in the post-construction. So in other words, we can't flow the rate of water leaving our site any more than what it's doing before. We have to be less. So there will be a reduction is what's required up to the 25-year storm event. So that's what we would be looking at.
What I want these people to understand, and anybody who comes here in opposition in regards to stormwater, is that state law has your back. That state law requires that when they put their permit into the city, that they prove to the city that their post-development runoff is, or runoff flow is not going to exceed pre-development runoff flow. Now, we've heard your concern, and I think it's a serious issue, but state law requires that when they're done doing their development, they've not negatively impacted you.
And I'll be happy
That's
to meet
state law and city ordinance.
and I'll be happy to meet with anybody out in the rotunda after this meeting as well.
Any questions for Mr. Price? Mr. Farmer?
I'd move that we approve, and I'll approve with the staff recommendation, but with a statement that to get with staff and the applicant to work on more appropriate language between now and city council. And I guess I would further say, I echo Mr. Price's statement. I mean, I think there are times where, I mean, and as I'm reading this, I'm nodding my head as Brian was talking about how he put this in here. But I mean, I think there are times where language like this probably does not apply. And there, I mean, it doesn't hurt to have some dialogue before we get here for a better recommendation.
We have a motion and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Price. All right, next on the agenda, we have several amendments and resolutions. Is there any opposition to any of the amendments and resolutions? Okay. We'll go through them as they are on the agenda. Item 17 on the agenda. I'm not going to read it, but is there any concern or question?
This is a clerical thing on item 305.3, number 1. For final plats not reviewed by the planning, there is no submittal deadline. Seems like that should say commission.
Okay, we'll change that.
We have a motion to approve item 17 as amended, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We have item 18, changes the minimum gravel base from 6 inches to 8 inches in the Hamilton County subdivision regulations.
If I may, we've been requiring this since the mid-'90s. This is really a cleanup. I don't think you should, if you've built a subdivision in Hamilton County with less than 8 inches of base, you've done it incorrectly. We've been requiring this, I think, for 20 years.
Yeah, sub-regs just say 6 inches.
We're trying to do some cleanup just to be consistent. So it really is cleanup.
Should we defer for 90 days? We have a motion to approve, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We also have item 19.
Yeah, this is also clerical, or clean, not really clerical, this is a cleanup. Right now in the town of Walden, it requires that the planning agency advertise for town of Walden zoning cases. We don't do that, never have. So we're cleaning that up to say that the town is responsible for public notice of the Board of Commissioners. Also, one of the sections of the Walden zoning code, it basically states, highlighted in red and strike through, if a modification is made or additional requirements are added to the proposed rezoning by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, the modified amendment comes back to the Planning Commission for review. We're, at the request of the town of Walden, taking that out and just basically saying the town of Walden can approve or disapprove the proposed amendment or approve the amendment with modification.
You may recall in December, I came back and you had, because the Walden zoning ordinance required a review after amendments were made, and so we're just cleaning that up.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any opposition?
Can I ask a question? Just because I don't know.
Is there, does Walden appoint someone on the planning? Just because I'm curious.
As far as I know, no.
Okay. It's just, actually, it was just a curious question. Thank you.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed?
Thanks.
Motion carries. And then item 20 is Mr. Schultz.
Yes, this is added back in August of 2019 at the request of the Hamilton County Attorney's Office for special permits for commercial farming and commercial animal husbandry. Since that time, we have gotten several requests for permits. The way this was written, if you're just doing farming, you had to get this special permit. So we reached out to CTAS, which is an advisory board for county governments, and basically their response was, which is on the next screen, state law prohibits county governments from using zoning ordinances or to restrict commercial or to restrict commercial, sorry, not commercial, but restrict farming altogether. We can't adopt any tools through zoning that restricts farming. And several places have tried. It's illegal, so we're taking that out immediately of the zoning regulations for the county.
We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Let me just make a comment on that, because as we're trying to respond to a lot of the expectation that we have a much more engaged and urbanized area, we currently are doing things like this. We do go through our attorney's office to do it, but in all situations, sometimes you take 3 steps forward and then you got to take 2 back. So that's in essence what we're doing here. So we may think of another way to sort of, and the real intent, just so everybody's aware of it, the real intent was to have a process to where if someone wanted to open, a chicken poultry plant and they were right between R1s, even though they were A1, to have some control over that legislatively. And we still think that's important for those R1 developments out in the county that have A1 next to them. So, but this was not the right tool. So again, we'll take 2 steps back.
And just to be clear too, also, municipalities can restrict farming. They have that power, but there's also an amendment in front of the state legislature this year to take that away from municipalities. There's a lot of tools that we're going to be going through next couple months, or legislation that we'll go over with you. A lot of things we bring to you is because of state law changes. Doesn't make sense sometimes, but that's why we have to do it.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, that's why a lot of times I tell a lot of people some of the easiest votes up here is going from A1 to R1, especially when developers are looking at developing property, because it not only protects their investment, also protects as you continue to get R1s out there. If you get R1 zones, they are more restrictive relative to that. But just a comment. Thanks.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We do have time on our agenda for public comment on non-agenda items. Is there any? I ask every month, even if you're not here.
Lisa Floden, 330 Crestway Drive, at my newly renovated house. I would like to respectfully request that we move ahead with the ADU ordinance citywide, but limit permits initially to lots that represent the ideal for the form. This would give this city the ability to gain knowledge and understanding that would be needed to consider less than and finesse the ordinance for less than ideal conditions in the future. I advocate for detached ADUs to be permitted on single lots that are a minimum of 0.3 of an acre. This size is sufficient for limiting the percentage of impervious lot coverage for some of these drainage issues in our older neighborhoods, and it is also sufficient for preserving green space so that canopy trees could actually still be properly sited. I advocate for owner occupancy and the restriction in R1 that one lot may have only one legal lease. This protects the neighborhoods from investors and absentee landlords who might do a double rental on a single lot in R1. And that's what I have for today.
Where are we on ADUs and why are they not happening?
We actually RPA presented to City Council a couple months ago. We had the public hearing here several months ago, hearing from proponents of ADUs. Council, I think, feels at this time not to move forward until we go through the zoning code assessment to see where that stands. That pretty much it. There's also discussions on, is it citywide or is it restricted to overlay, which is much smaller than use. So there's still a lot of questions out there. It's not settled. I think RPA staff would like to move forward with it. It's on our website. We're hearing from everybody they want ADUs. Just there's no, I think, political will to move forward this time.
Quickly, in terms of the R2 special, or the duplex special permit council is on board with that, and they'll be passing a resolution to ask us to put together that tool, and so we'll be forwarding it to City Council. We're also, in terms of progress of the zoning code assessment, we did get about 5 or 6 responses from consultant teams, and actually we're in the process of reviewing those now, so we'll hopefully have a consultant selected by March. We're also in the process of working on some new urban residential zones. Because one of the things that we know that's a real big hole right now in our toolbox is having a good urban residential zone. We are actually, Brian and staff, in addition to doing a lot of other things, are working on that tool. So I just want you to know staff is eager to move forward as much as you are. We're just trying to manage what little time we have. And I think
Councilman Ledford.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think the correct answer would be that right now we're, as a council, focusing on a couple of different things. We're working with steep slopes, floodplain. I think that has consumed us. We have a subcommittee that is meeting again tomorrow with LDO and RPA. And ADUs, if you want my personal opinion, I think kind of hit us from left field. Was thrown in there with the steep slope conversation. And contrary to what some might think, we've got a lot on our plate in the city. So I want to make sure that we do it right, that we don't make a huge mistake. And I think once that we are able to put something in place with steep slope and floodplain conversation, that we would be glad to revisit that. But I think that's we just had a lot thrown at us at one time. And like Brian said, the appetite was kind of like, I think we've just loaded our plate up a little bit too full to give this the attention that I think it really, truly deserves. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Can I get approval for the minutes? Motion to approve, and it has been seconded. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Mr. Payne.
So are we through streaming this?
No, we're still on. Still live.
It'll probably be a couple minutes.
It'll be a couple minutes.
Where's the camera? Did they leave in the middle of the...
say hi, wait, say hi.
It doesn't end till we tell them to stop.